Hey guys, welcome back to the movie summary. Beginning of the movie, we see 16-year-old Mark. He is enjoying with his friends at party. He likes a girl at the party and tries to spend private time with her. But she doesn't agree. Then he comes home and goes to bed watching adult videos on his laptop. Next day, Mark's mom comes near him and wakes him up saying it's 12 o'clock. She tells Mark that your uncle is coming from Moscow today and his fiancée Gina will also come with him. After a while Mark's uncle comes home with his fiancée and introduces her to everyone. Mark sees Gina's beauty as she serves food to everyone. Mark's mom talks to them about Gina's dressing. Dressing like that may be common in Moscow and says we shouldn't talk about a person dressing sense. Gina was already married and divorced. It will be her second marriage with Mark's uncle. When Gina was with her first husband, a daughter was born. Her name is Natasha. She is 14 years old. Gina went to Moscow again and brought Natasha. Mark sees Natasha for the first time at the airport. After coming home, Gina and Mark's uncle will get married. While everyone is having lunch, Mark watches Natasha. Later Mark's mom tells him to show his room to Natasha. Then Mark shows Natasha his room. Then Natasha asks what you do here. Then Mark says I will watch TV and study here. Natasha asks Mark if you have spent time with any girl here. Hearing this, Mark gets shocked and says, "What are you talking about? You are only 14 years old and you are talking like this. Don't you think it is wrong to talk like this?" So Natasha tells that, "I have spent time with about 100 people so far." And she asks if you also want to spend private time with me? "I have no problem," she says. Mark heard this and says, "Your mom got married to my uncle. Now we are brother and sister. It is wrong for us to do this." Then Natasha says, "I don't like my mom at all. My mom spent time with many people. It says that I have been caught red-handed many times." They talk for a while and then Mark goes to his job. He works in a call center. Night Mark comes home. His mom says you have to take good care of Natasha from now on because she came here from another city. Mark says okay to that. Next day Mark goes to Natasha's house. Then Natasha was very sad because of Natasha's mother. Natasha's mom says to Mark, she is only 14 years old and if she gives you a problem, then don't take it seriously. Later Natasha's mom calls Natasha. She angrily leaves the place. Mark also goes after Natasha. He asks why are you so upset? She said that my mom doesn't like me at all and she brought me here from another city and I'm bored here. Hearing this, Mark takes Natasha to his friend Rufus's house. There the three of them talk. Now Natasha feels a little relaxed. Later, Natasha often asks Mark about Rufus. Mark then tells Natasha that he is now living alone and his parents recently got divorced. Later they both go to a hotel and have lunch. After lunch they both go to Natasha's house. Then Natasha says I will come to your house tomorrow. Next day, Natasha comes home while Mark is studying. Later they both talk for a long time. After a while they go for a ride outside on bicycles. Mark sells drugs to some people. Natasha sees this and says I also take drugs. Mark also says okay to that. The next day Natasha rushes to Mark's house. There, Mark smokes a drug-laced cigarette. He gives that cigarette to Natasha and she also smokes it. Later Natasha says I will use your laptop for a while and Mark says okay to that. Natasha takes Mark's laptop and opens adult videos. Actually Mark had seen those videos earlier but forgot to close them. As soon as Natasha opens, those videos will appear. Seeing this, Mark tells her to turn off the laptop, but she doesn't listen. She comes closer to Mark and shows some photos. After that she asks him that if you want to spend time with me. Mark also cannot control himself and they both make private time together. Since then they both become very close. They understand each other well. Daily they make private time together. Now Mark is very fond of Natasha. One day Natasha's mom and Mark's uncle go out. So Natasha has to stay at Mark's house and they chat for a while. Natasha comes into Mark's room and says, I love being here with you. I want to marry you and stay with you for the rest of my life. Then Mark says you can be with me. Then she says, my mom cheats on your uncle. Even now she has an affair with someone else. I told the same thing to your uncle. But your uncle doesn't believe me. Next day Gina and Mark's uncle comes to house. Gina tells Natasha to go home. Then Natasha says I will not come. Gina says, I know why you are not coming, and asks how many days will you enjoy with Mark? Hearing this, Natasha gets angry and tries to beat Gina. Mark's dad stops and grabs Natasha. Later, Mark's parents sends Natasha to her house. Next day, Mark goes to meet Natasha at her house. Then Gina opens the door, and Mark says sorry to her. She says that there is no fault of yours in what happened to yesterday. And also says Natasha is unable to control herself. She spends time with elders when she feels like it and asks Mark to leave. Mark leaves from there. That same night, Natasha comes to Mark with all the luggage. She said I think I have to go to Florida. And asks will you come with me? Mark doesn't say anything to that. Then Natasha tells my mother divorced with your uncle. The reason is that I make private time with your uncle. Hence there was a quarrel between them. The reason why I did this is that my mom should not cheat your uncle. After that Mark takes Natasha to his room without saying anything. That night they both sleep there. In the morning, Mark gives Natasha all the money he has. After that Natasha leaves from there. One day Mark is at home, Mark's parents talking about his uncle's marriage and divorce. Actually all of them don't know that Natasha is spend private time with Mark's uncle. Then Mark goes out on a bicycle. Rufus then calls Mark, but Mark does not pick up his call. A few days later Mark goes to Rufus's house where Mark sees Natasha. Rufus says with Mark that Natasha's staying with me. Few days back I called you to tell about this. But you did not pick up the call. There Natasha is looking at Mark. Seeing her, Mark loses faith in love. He leaves in anger. When he comes home, Mark is very upset that Natasha has cheated him. This is how this movie ends.